Time for Clash of the Classics.
Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Clash of the Classics. Clash of the Classics is a division of the Berryman Academy. For a complete list of all the Berryman automotive spray cleaners and additives, check them out anytime at berrymanproducts.com. Alright, let's get right into it. I'm Donnie, I'll be your host for today's Classic Showdown, and we're going to have some fun. Today the 1963 Buick Wildcat battles that 1963 Ford Galaxie. I want to start with the Buick. Back in '63, GM used a few deliberate terms to describe the new Wildcat, and they were smooth, powerful, and quiet. The lines were clean and had sort of a unique elegance that was pretty typical for Buick back in those days. We're going to talk about some of the tastefulness of this car over the next few minutes, and I think most people will agree that the Wildcat, at least for 1963, was, and even remains today, truly a remarkable automobile. The interior was well appointed, the 401 nailhead was plenty powerful, and that silky smooth performance of that Dynaflow-based transmission that we'll talk about a little later, all made for a great combination of power and comfort. 1963 was the first year that the Wildcat was its own series. No longer was it a sub-series of the Invicta line. Buick's marketing division predicted the car would be well received, and it turns out they were spot on with those predictions because Buick sold over 35,000 Wildcats in 1963. Just over 6,000 were convertibles. There were somewhere near 12,000 two-door sport coupes, and the rest were four-door hardtops. As with all the General Motors full-size B-body models, all three body styles of the Wildcat accommodated 6 passengers in absolute comfort and luxury. And while the Wildcat's exterior styling may be somewhat conservative, there are several subtle details throughout the exterior that give it at least what I believe to be a distinctive look. The entire grille opening is framed with fluted silver metal paneling that's capped off with a polished stainless steel molding. On top of that, the whole grille area, even the bumper, has a great shape and style to it. Within the panel, there are 3 separate horizontal vents that are Buick's kind of venti-port styling theme. Polished moldings around each wheel opening and then down around the lower portion of the rocker panels really add a nice touch. The body sits on the same steel X-frame design that Pontiac used on their 1959 and then again on the 1960 models, which by the way is the same frame design that Chevy used on their 59 through their 1964 full-size models. Unlike a lot of other full perimeter frames, the X-frame didn't have side rails, so all the rigidity came from the frame intersection at the middle of the car. As far as the body was concerned, it was supported front and rear via pretty stout coil springs. Under the big hood was Buick's famous nail-headed engine. It was a 401 cubic inch V8 with a Rochester 4-barrel carburetor, 10.25 to 1 compression ratio, producing a pretty respectable 325 horsepower and an amazing, at least for the time, 445 pound-feet of torque. The only other engine available in the Wildcat was the optional 340 horsepower, 425 cubic inch V8. When it came to transmissions, Buick offered a couple choices. The turbine drive automatic was the standard equipment and easily the most popular choice. But also available for the first time was an optional Borg-Warner T10 4-speed manual. Not many buyers chose it. In fact, only 346 cars were built in 1963 using that T10. I can't imagine what a Survivor Wildcat with that transmission would be worth today. As far as the turbine drive was concerned, Buick had used it in the Invicta and then the Wildcat since 1960. It was the final version of the original Dynaflow, and 1963 ended up being the last year that Buick used it. When it came to options, the Wildcat was loaded with them. It has air conditioning, AM/FM Buick radio, power windows, a remote trunk opener, tinted glass, safety padded lower dash panel. The speedometer had a speed minder and a power driver's seat. There were actually 3 different driver's seat options, a 4, 6, or an 8 position seat. And in the center was a beautifully crafted full-length console with ribbed stainless steel paneling. Then at the end of the console was a factory-equipped tachometer, which is part of the Wildcat's sport appeal. Its red line was right above the 5,000 RPM mark. Some of the other items that came standard on all Wildcats included a deluxe steering wheel, full wheel covers, license plate frames, center console, padded instrument panel, foam rubber headliner, electric clock, and a courtesy lamp in the trunk. As far as the overall feel of the drive goes, when you stab the accelerator, there's an immediate response from that 401 V8. The car weighed somewhere near 4,200 pounds, and even at that size, it accelerated pretty impressively. There was a bit of an unfamiliar feel with it, as there were no upshifts of gears present like you'd find sort of in a conventional automatic today. It's just a steady flowing, uninterrupted turbine-like smoothness. It's a remarkable feeling, and it's one that you can easily get used to. Now, before we go any further, let's talk about one of the finest automotive brake and part spray cleaners in the industry. Berryman Brake Clean quickly and effortlessly dissolves brake fluid, dust, grease, motor oil, power steering fluid, any other contaminants you'll find on metal parts. They are great to use on all brake parts, including rotors, drums, calipers, cylinders, springs, and other related parts. The professional strength formula dries quickly and completely without residue. Remember, when it has to be clean, reach for Berryman Brake Clean. Alright, now let's talk about that 1963 Ford Galaxie. The 1963 model was essentially unchanged from 1962, except for some freshening and then some aesthetic trim. The windshields were reshaped and a 4-door hardtop 500XL was added. A lower fastback roofline was added around mid-year to give the car a more sleek look and make the big cars more competitive on the NASCAR tracks with less drag and better aerodynamics at high speed. The 1963 and a half model, which incidentally was the industry's first official half-year model, was called the Sports Hardtop. Some folks called it a fastback. The decision ended up being a profitable one for Ford because the new Sports Hardtop models easily outsold the box top square roof models. The Sports Hardtop was available in both Galaxie 500 and the Galaxie 500 XL trim. Mercury also received the new roofline. It was under the Marauder badge in Monterey, Montclair, and the Park Lane models. And the one side note that I thought was worth mentioning was in 1963, Ford offered a stripped-down model called the Ford 300. It was a no-frills big Ford priced around $100 below the base Galaxie sedans. It was mostly used by taxi companies and some police departments. It was offered for 1963 only and replaced by the Custom Series in 1964. At the beginning of the 1963 model run, the 292 Y-block V8 was replaced as the base V8 engine with Fairlane's new small block 260. The only problem with the 260 was it was a little too anemic for the heavy full-size Ford and ended up getting scrapped in favor of the 289. In fact, the engine revision happened right about the same time the 63 and a half models were introduced. At that point, the 289 was quickly becoming the go-to engine in the Ford small block series. The 260 continued to be offered on the Falcon and the Sprint, and later around mid-1964 it was available in the early version of the 1965 Mustang. Then shortly after that, the 260, which again was somewhat disappointing in terms of performance, was replaced by the 289 in all models. Ford continued to offer the FE Series 352 in the 1963 full-size, as well as 3 versions of the 390 V8, the regular, the high performance, and in the police versions. When it came to transmission options, there were a total of 5 different choices for 1963. First choice was a 3-speed manual with a column shift, which was standard on most models. Secondly, you had the heavy-duty Borg-Warner 4-speed manual, which is standard on the big 406 V8. Then there was a 3-speed manual with overdrive. That was optional, but it was rarely ordered. The fourth option was the 2-speed Ford-O-Matic, which was common on the 6-cylinder and the small block V8s. And then lastly was the 3-speed Cruise-O-Matic automatic transmission, which was common for the majority of the 352 and the 390 engines. Incidentally, that transmission was very reliable. In fact, it was very well ahead of its time, especially back in the gear portion where the carriers are located. Believe it or not, there were also several different rear-end ratios. That, along with the 5 different transmissions we just talked about and 8 different engines, and all of a sudden there were a huge number of different driveline combinations for 1963. Of all the choices and combinations available, the most produced combination for the Galaxie and the Galaxie 500 was the 352 V8 with the Cruise-O-Matic 3-speed and the 3-to-1 rear-end gear ratio. Also in 1963, Ford discontinued using the Club, the Town, and the Victoria monikers for the different body styles and replaced them with the generic 2-door, 4-door, and hardtop designations. For me, it was a bit of a tough decision between these 2 cars. My wife's grandfather had the Buick, and my late sister drove a 1963 Galaxie for many years. I like them both. Let us know in the comments below which car you prefer. Thanks for hanging out with us today. That's just about all the time we have. Big thanks to everyone at the Berryman B12 Studios in Dallas, Texas. Berryman makes all of the Clash of the Classics features possible. For the finest in automotive spray cleaners and fuel additives, check them out anytime at berrymanproducts.com. If you like this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. That way there you won't miss an episode. Thanks again. See you next time.